Hey guys, today we're going to be interviewing a astrologer by the name of Vic DiCara. He's got a really cool YouTube channel and he's an expert on the Nakshatras. So Vic, hello and thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me over.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
What do you want to know?
How did you get into astrology?
I was into everything Indian. And then at a certain point in my life, I got sick of working with computers. And then my wife said, you should be an astrologer out of the blue. And so I just got into it all of a sudden.
Okay. Did you have a teacher or how did that passion develop?
Well, I would have liked to have had a teacher, but I'm a little bit picky. So there wasn't any one source of information on astrology that was really like, oh, this is I just need to learn from this one thing. Everything was like confusing and contradicting each other and didn't really make too much sense. So what I actually had to do was sort it out for myself. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things where you pick up something quickly because you must have kind of done it in previous life.
Yes.
So it was one of those things where it was like I kind of already knew what it was. I just needed to like remind myself.
Okay.
No, I never really got one like, here's my teacher. It was just like I tried to take in as much as I could and had to try to sort it all out and dust off my past life memories.
Okay. How long did that process take?
2 years.
No, that's not bad for a whole lifetime then. All right, cool. So tell us a little bit about your books on the Nakshatras.
Yeah, well, I have two. The first one that I did was 27 Stars, 27 Gods. And what I did there was, the thing about nakshatras is, it's obvious that nakshatras are the original form of truly Vedic astrology. So I was very interested in learning about them, figuring them out. But the problem with it is, where's the information on? Like, we know, if you just read Vedanga Jyotish, then you know that nakshatras were what they were using. They weren't even using rashis. Mm-hmm. But what these nakshatras meant to them, like to the ancient Vedic peoples, there's so little information on it in the Vedas. There's just, like I was saying about in general about astrology, it's just a lot of conflicting views. This person thinks it's this, that person thinks it's that, this person explains it that way, this other person explains it another way. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that you get in the Vedas are a list of names, of 27 or 28 names, and you get a list of devas or gods associated with each one. Mm-hmm. So it dawned on me that apparently maybe that's supposed to be enough to understand what each nakshatra is. So what I did was I just compiled all the stories of each deva that seemed relevant to the name. You know, like if the name is Rohini and the god is Ka or Prajapati or Brahma, mm-hmm. then I would go through all the information that's available about Brahma that has anything to do with the word Rohini.
Okay, sure.
And pull it together into one thing. And so I made a chapter on each nakshatra where I examine the stuff about the nakshatra gods that relates to the nakshatra. And by doing so, you really understand the nakshatra without having to like invent new systems and new way, you know. So that was the first book, 27 Stars, 27 Gods. And I was pretty satisfied with it. Yet, I think it was last year or 2017. All of a sudden it came to my attention that there's something in Taittiriya Brahmana mm-hmm. where there's actually quite a lot of information about nakshatras in Taittiriya Brahmana. And now since then I found out there's also some other section I have to do something. But this thing in Taittiriya Brahmana was incredible because it was an actual 27 lines that were actually intending to tell you what the nakshatras are about. Mm-hmm. Like it's written to describe the symbolic nature of the nakshatras. So when I got introduced to that, I felt, whoa, like eureka. Like I finally found the thing that I've been looking for 8 years. So I set out to translate that, you know, well, to do a really good translation. And then what I wound up doing was a translation and an explanation So that's the new book that I just put out. It's called Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology. It's like a translation of that sutra, an explanation of it, and then the second half of the book is more stories of the gods. There's, but more like in a less of an encyclopedia and more of like a story, a narrative tale.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So let's step back from that for a little bit, because most of us are palmists and we don't study the nakshatras specifically. What are the nakshatras?
Nakshatras are stars. Like when people say, what's in the stars, what's the stars, the fate, and all those things, like, what is it, influenza or something, all these words that are related. Well, influenza could be anything, but, all the words that are related to astrology and stars, this is what the stars actually are. The stars actually are nakshatras.
Sure.
In India, it's nakshatras, but in every culture, every astrological culture has some parallel to a nakshatra. Like the Babylonians have 18 constellations, the Egyptians have 33, the Chinese also have 27 or 28.
Mm-hmm.
Different cultures, because astrology used to be practiced in two ways. By looking at the sky that you can see, or by calculating things.
Sure.
But the ability to calculate things came later, because it takes time to figure out the mathematics of where something is when you can't see it. So in the oldest records that we have, and who knows what was going on in previous yuga, we don't know about that. But as far as the recorded history that we have, the oldest records that we have, the thing that we would call astrology was actually like doing nimitta, or like omen reading. Mm-hmm. But instead of looking at birds, just like looking at birds or looking at wind or dogs, you would look at the sky.
Okay, so they've got that in astrology too.
Yeah, well, that's what astrology is based on. But when you look up at during the day, you don't really see much. Yeah. Because it's all blue, right? So most of the really old astrology was done with stars.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look up at night, there's a lot more to see. And so they developed a system of putting symbolism into the sky, or seeing the symbolism that's inherent in the sky, based on, there's 27 segments, because you'll get 27 sunrises in the course of a whole month.
Sure.
So each little segment that the moon moves between one sunrise and the next is another nakshatra, mm-hmm. Anchored to a star called Yogatara, an anchoring star, or an anchoring cluster of stars. And really the fundamental symbolism of each nakshatra is really into what those stars actually look like. It's,
okay. Yeah. How do you mean?
Yeah, like Mula, right? Mula nakshatra is literally very south and shaped like a bowl, mm-hmm. shaped like a pot. And so it has a symbolism of being down and being at the bottom. So it got called Mula. Swati, it's very far north and all by itself and just one star. So it gets a symbolism of going off on its own and being by itself, going far away. Mm-hmm. A Kritika looks like an axe.
Right.
It looks like an axe with a handle, and it's bright blue. So it's like energetic and releasing energy. So the basis of the symbolism is what those stars actually look like. So it's actually quite different than sign-based astrology, which is just as old, but wasn't really used for divination or prognostication, mm-hmm. because of the lack of the math to be able to tell where the planets are, because you can't see rashis. Mm-hmm. At all. You can't really see nakshatras, but you can reference them to stars. But with rashis, you can reference them to nakshatras so that you can see them. But you're really dealing with the sun, so it's much more sophisticated. It's much more difficult to do that. So it took a little more time. It wasn't until about 2,500 years ago, roughly, that humans started doing sign-based astrology, doing birth charts with 12 signs and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the difference.
Right. Cool. So you mentioned before that there are 27 nakshatras, but there used to be 28?
No, there still are 28. The 28th one is Abijit. Mm-hmm. But Abijit, what is Abijit? It's Vega. Like these days, an astronomer would call it Vega. So I don't know if you're familiar with stars, but Vega is like the North Star. Mm-hmm. Now it's Polaris, but over the course of time, the North Star can change from Polaris all the way to Vega, because it makes there's a small circle up in the sky that it can be due north over at different points in history. So in other words, this nakshatra Abijit, it's all the way up north. That's why it's Brahma. It's the top of the lotus where Brahma sits. So it's all the way up north, and the rest of the nakshatras are related to something called an ecliptic. I don't know, to give you a palmist version of it. The ecliptic is like everything. All the planets and everything moves on the ecliptic. The ecliptic is what we study in astrology. It's like you look at a palm. I guess you could do physiognomy, you could look at my ears, but most of your attention is on the palm, right?
That's right, yeah.
So like, and for an astrologer, most of the attention is on this area called an ecliptic. But Abijit is the furthest away you could possibly get from the ecliptic. Okay. So what it is, Abijit is your anchor point for the whole nakshatras. And according to the Taittiriya Brahmana, Abijit gives its symbolism of Abijit is in Uttarashada. That's where it comes into the ecliptic through Uttarashada.
Okay, that's where its influence is.
Yeah, and then there's another system of doing nakshatras, which is to use 28, but then they're not going to be the moon's segments like I explained before. They'll be more like literally this is the size of the constellation. More, not exactly like that. But the sages that gave that system of 28 said this is an unusual system. Generally, you should just use 27.
Okay.
So really, the 28th one wasn't really intended to be used for interpretation, but it's more like this is because if you get into the math of how you calculate the nakshatras, you need an angle, and so the Abijit is a reference point to the angle.
I understand. Because for palmists, 28 would be like the holy grail for us. Because we
really?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we correlate the zodiac signs by your finger. So there's 4 fingers, there's 3 phalanges on each one. And so you get 12, and each one becomes a 12 zodiac signs. And you can divide 12 or even 3 into 28 a lot easier than you can 27. So you'd always have a little bit of a remainder. And that's why palmistry never got into nakshatras, because you couldn't divide 12 into 28 or 27 at all. You'd always have an odd number or like a long decimal place left over after.
Yeah. There's some people have the theory that that's why the Abijit was dropped. When they went to sidereal zodiac, they wanted to put 27 nakshatras tied onto it. But I don't believe so, because this Taittiriya Brahmana is a very old book. It's at least 3,000 years old. And it's not considering 28, it's considering 27 nakshatras.
Okay.
But that is interesting. If you count all of your segments, you'll have 28, right? Because there's 12 and then 14.
Yeah, exactly. I think like palmistry and astrology were the same science once upon a time. They just got separated eventually.
So, I mean, definitely I agree, because basically what astrology is you're reading body language, but you're reading Virat Rupa. Right, Virat Rupa is the body of the whole Virat, the whole universe.
Yeah. So
just like you can read my body language, you can read Vishnu's body language by looking at the stars.
That's a very.
And so astrology is exactly this. I mean, palmistry or anything, like I know in Shastra, I hear about people that could look at your nose, shape of your nose, or the shape of your forehead, and then just understand you. But it's basically the same thing. Instead of looking at a universe body, you're looking at a human body, but it's basically the same thing.
It's a microcosm of the bigger macrocosm.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So tell me about the symbolism with these stars, because like the Ramayana, for example, that's all full of palmistry references. How do the nakshatra symbolisms relate to astrology?
How does the nakshatra symbolism relate to astrology?
Yeah. So you were saying before that there's a symbol, that there's a nakshatra with the symbol of axe on it. How can you use that axe knowledge to improve?
Yeah, okay. Right, so let's take Kritika and Rohini to the first two. So Kritika is supposed to be Shukram Prastat Jyotiravastat. It needs to take some kind of source of fuel and release it and change it into light. So at least it takes something that has a glow, Shukra, and change it into light, Jyoti. So what the symbolic nature of Kritika is that it consumes fuel and releases power. So like if you take a planet like Mars and you put it in Kritika, then that astrology there is describing a moment where there's a lot of potential to release energy, because the nature of Mars is to cut. Mars is real sharp.
Sure.
And not soft and not fluffy and not female at all. Mars is very male and cutting. And so is Kritika. So if you put Mars in Kritika, if you want to do something like start a project or start a business, start an enterprise, do something very adventurous, go out on a expedition, you would want to do it when Mars is in Kritika.
I see.
But if you're thinking about getting married or doing something soft, like writing a poem, making a painting, spending time with a child, then you would want to avoid Mars being in Kritika.
Okay.
Because it has a completely non-compatible energy with that. You don't want to be hard, cutting, chopping with those type of subjects. So if you take a planet like Venus and put it in Kritika, then it has a different, the interpretation is problematic for Venus subjects. Or you could even say it could be it will be problematic on both sides. The person could also be kind of lethargic and need to be pushed, like not able to produce their own energy because they're soft. They're too soft where they should be tough. And then, so that's one example of how you could read like Kritika in somebody's chart, or even for a Muhurta, just like if you want to know what to do on this day. So Rohini is just very similar to Kritika because it's bringing out energy. But Rohini is doing it more in a feminine way, where Rohini is like the very word Rohini means to arouse.
Okay.
So Rohini is like attracting nourishment and then producing a result. So if you put like Moon, Venus in Rohini, then it symbolizes somebody that's got tons of fertility, a lot of creativity, very soft, very loving, and can generates the energy just like Kritika does. But now it's generating it in like a more feminine way, like inclusive and not so sharp and breaking things in order to do it, putting things together and bringing people towards it. So that's how so every nakshatra has its like code. This is what this nakshatra is for and not for. And then you see what about the planets that are occupying it? If the planet goes well with that subject, then it signifies good things for that subject. If the planet doesn't go well with that subject, it signifies problems with that subject.
Okay. Is there an easy way to memorize all of this? Because 27 stars or 28 of them means there's a lot of memorization here.
That's what Taittiriya, the author of Taittiriya Brahmana, had in mind when he wrote a sutra. So sutras are the way to memorize something. The sutra means like a very compacted, you turn it into just a thread.
Sure.
So, you reduce a whole cloth to a thread, and then it's a sutra. So he just wrote 27 lines, and it's just 6 words on a line. So you just have to learn like 30 words or something. But even, you have to do it. But it's the same thing. Like, if you went to school traditionally, then the first thing you would do is you would get tons of things that you have to memorize. And then that would be like your first grade, second grade, third grade. And then for your fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, the teacher would sit there with you. You wouldn't have any new memorization, but the teacher would start to explain what you had memorized. And that's going to take 4 or 5 times longer to master than just the memorization. So, you can memorize these Nakshatra Sutras really well, really fast. But to really understand what they are all about, it takes contemplation, meditation. You have to have, knowledge. It takes a bit.
All right, fair enough.
But that's why I wrote the explanation. I didn't just write the translation in my new book. I wrote an explanation to explain the whole thing.
Oh, awesome. So what would you prefer to read in say, astrology birth chart? Would you look at the nakshatras or the zodiac signs? Which are more important?
They're just different. And there's no reason why not to look at them at the same time. The thing is, if you notice in the history of astrology, as I was saying, like prior to 2,500 years ago, everything in India was nakshatras. And everything outside of India was just also like their version of nakshatras. And then all of a sudden, I think it was either the Indians or the Babylonians or both. They start to figure out how to calculate these positions of things. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it took over. Nobody cared about nakshatras anymore. Everybody starts getting into 12 rashis.
Sure.
So why? There's a reason why that happened. It's actually because it's a pretty amazing system.
Okay.
And it's a lot more, it has a lot more potential to answer some really detailed questions. You can do that much more easily with horoscopic astrology, where you have 12 houses, 12 signs. So if you just ignore the 12 houses and signs, you lose a really useful astrological tool.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason to like just say, well, I'm just going to do nakshatras and I'm not going to do the 12 signs of the zodiac. That's like saying you're only going to look at one of the lines on my palm.
Sure.
Yeah, but you can use them both. Like, for example, if a planet is in the 5th house and in Kritika, it's different than if it's in the 7th house and in Kritika.
I see.
Because the 7th house is about marriage, the 5th house is about intelligence. Mm-hmm. But Kritika is really good for intelligence because intelligence should be sharp, right?
Yeah.
But marriage is not supposed to be sharp. Marriage is supposed to be soft.
Okay.
Right? So even just on that one level, what I explained before was just see if the planet is conducive with the nakshatra. But now think about the house and the planet and the nakshatra. Put in the 12, mix it all together. That's what you have to do. That's where astrology becomes difficult.
Okay. Cool. Now, I noticed you've got a tabla drum in the background. You've got a musical background yourself.
Musical background, yeah. This is actually a dhol. It's a wooden, like pakwach, small. This is a pakwach. This is a pakwach. This is a dhol.
Oh, wow. You keep them around you all the time.
Well, this is like the room where I keep my stuff. And I have a veena and a tampura.
Oh, awesome.
But none of them are tuned really well. My favorite one is downstairs. I have a clay mridanga. That's the best sounding one.
All right. Oh, cool. Well, the reason I was asking is because I know you've got a musical background. Can you tell us a little bit about mantras? And
sure. Mantras are,
planets and also nakshatras, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's interesting. The word mantra, it means manas tra. Tra means, like in English, if we say refrigerate, or if you say refrigerator. Mm-hmm. Adding a tra to the end is like adding a refrigerate refrigerate tra. So a mantra is like a mind maker. That's what the word means, a manas maker. Uh-huh. So it's something that builds your intellect. It builds your point of view. It builds your experiencing machine. Your manas is your experiencing machine. Your experiencing machine is built from words because that's the food for the brain. The food for your body is calories, vitamins, etc. But the food for the brain is words. Mm-hmm. And so mantras are composed of words, not sounds. This is an important thing.
Okay.
Mantras are not, this is not a mantra. It's a sound. This is called there's a difference between a vacham and a dhanam. Dvana. This is like a dvan. It's just a sound. And then there's a van, right? This is a vani and dvani. Those are the two words. Vani is a word. It carries a lot of meaning. Dvani is a sound, like a bird can make a dvani. Okay. A piano can make a dvani. So mantras are really made out of vani, vak. Mm-hmm. Sounds that are the most important sound is a word. So there's no necessity for a mantra to even be spoken. What to speak of sung or accompanied by a musical instrument. The mantra doesn't even have to be spoken. It has to be contemplated. However, when you are doing like a ritual, when you're doing upasana or like your meditation, the mantra generally you won't even say it. But when you're doing a yagya, the mantras are loudly pronounced, right?
Sure.
So they're very loudly pronounced. And India developed a really amazing musical culture around that. Mm-hmm. Like some of those fascinating ancient Indian instruments are like, they would have these veenas, but nobody would even have to play them. They would be played by the wind.
Wow.
Yeah, the strings would vibrate by the wind, and so the whole yagya area would be reverberating with these basic notes, like the sa and the sa re ga ma. It was just like, and you would walk into that, and your whole being would be so just.
Okay.
Yeah, we have records of these things.
I'd imagine the randomness of the noise that it produces would correlate to the order that the yagya is trying to produce as well, isn't it?
Yeah. You want to tune. That's the thing. If you look in the Nakshatra Shastras, they'll tell you that a re is different than a ma, right? The second note is different than the third, is different than the fourth, is different than the fifth. It has a different effect.
Mm-hmm.
So like seconds and seventh, they have a disturbing effect. So they're like malefic planets.
Ah, okay.
They push you to change, though. That's what a malefic planet will do. Or a difficult thing in your life is like a second tone or a seventh tone. The purpose for it is to resolve. Second tone sounds horrible. Like, I don't know, if you play on a piano a C and a D at the same time, it sounds like vomit. It sounds like puke. It sounds terrible. But if you press, so why would you ever do it?
Mm-hmm.
But you want to do it because you want to resolve a tension, right? So you want to do two. You press them both at the same time, and then you just let one of them go, and all of a sudden it sounds nice. It's something like that. It sounds like a release. And so that's what malefic planets do. They push you to solve a problem, let go of something that's causing a disharmony, mm-hmm. and come to a note which is resolved, a resolving note, like a first or a third.
That's what Saturn is all about. It creates so much suffering, but then it rewards you for all that suffering too.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. They're not gentle planets at all. Or even nakshatras like Ardra, Mula, even Kritika to some extent, or the Bhadrapada, Purva Bhadrapada. It's not gentle. Mm-hmm. It's very, but by putting you onto that, it makes you figure out how to go ha, So it would correspond to something like a second or a seventh. Whereas you have other ones like Mrigashirsha, it's like a fifth note. It's just very placid, peaceful, cooperative. It cooperates with all the other notes. Mm-hmm. Some of them are, I would say like the Palgunis are like the fifth note, probably Rohini, but Rohini is probably like a whole chord, first, third, and fifth. Mm-hmm. So you can think about sonic, what would you call it? Sonic parallels to the symbolism of the nakshatras. As far as mantras go, they would use music to amplify the mantras, mm-hmm. so that people wouldn't lose their attention. The thing about a yagya is that you have lay people get involved. Because like just your average person from the village will need to perform a yagya, but you have to keep them focused you have to keep them focused during a yagya, so you don't just tell them, well, think about this mantra over and over again. They can't. Sure. You start thinking about their kids or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you make this big loud thing with that's supporting the mantra, and then it helps keep their attention. So some of Vedic music was derived like that to support mantra. But then there's a whole different type of Vedic music, which is kirtan, which doesn't even need a mantra. It's like the music itself is the music itself is the mantra. Mm-hmm. Not the music and the singing and everything itself is the point. Okay. But
very interesting distinction. But there are mantras for planets, right? There's a mantra for Jupiter or a mantra for Mars and so on.
There's a lot, and this is another case where, as I was studying the things, I was like, well, how many mantras are there? Like everybody's got a different one. So what I realized is Vedic culture is actually pretty hard to actually find, even theoretically, because it's from such an ancient period of time that's so removed from where we are now, and it's gone through so much change over the time. Mm-hmm. So even back to the time of Buddhism, which is like, I think it's 3,000 years ago.
26.
Even back to the it's got to be prior to that to actually get to Vedic culture. So when Buddhism had an effect, serious effect on India, And so not only when it was native in India, but also when it was wasn't even exported, but it was like exiled. When it was exiled to what is the next one? Nepal.
Tibet, Nepal.
Yeah, and then it kind of had a reflux also back in with tantrics. They called themselves tantrics, but they were Buddhist tantrics.
Yeah.
So they came back in through North India, and then there was a lot of blending with the Vedic concepts and things like Sahaj and different approaches to yoga. So there's Vedic mantras, and then there's like tantric mantras, and there's some tantric mantras that are authentic Vedic tantra, and some that are Buddhist tantra. So there's all kinds of mess. This is Kali Yuga. Everything is like a mess. So there's going to be different ideas about what the tantric concept of a mantra will be. You just have a bija, which is like one of the classic bijas, like Kleem or Shreem or something. Then you just take the name of the planet and you name it. This is the easiest way to do a mantra. You can do it for anybody or anything. You just have to know what the bija mantras signify. You pick the one that's related to the thing you want to evoke. Take the person's name. Repeat the first syllable before you say the full name. So like Shreem, Shum, Shukraya, Namah is like a constructed mantra. It's like a tantric way of constructing a mantra for Venus.
Okay.
And it just follows a formula. So they find there's a lot of that on the internet. You can, if you look up mantra for Venus, you'll probably see a lot of Om Shreem Shum Shukraya Namah or something. But the one like gold mine for mantras that I actually found is in a book called Prasha or Hora Shastra. Prasha or Hora Shastra is a fragmented book that was the original text was lost, and then it was reconstructed in the 18th century. So it's all kinds of crazy all over there's all just, it's not organized at all. There's all mixtures of everything, but there's each little section in it is amazing.
Okay. And
so there's one section in there that's just whoever is the author of this bit is a complete Vedic genius, because they selected these incredible actual Vedic mantras, like literally from Rig Veda and Samaveda and Yajur Veda, that so perfectly expose what this planet is, what's really going on with this planet. And if you meditate on this mantra, chant this mantra, you'll resolve your problems with this planet.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did a series on it in my YouTube channel on what these 7, actually 9. He gives 9. He gives mantras for Rahu and Ketu also.
Okay. So bringing this back to palmistry, let's say you've got a broken line for Saturn, then in theory you should just say the mantra for Saturn. That should start to resolve that. Yeah,
well, authentic, like these days they're called upayas, or like ways of fixing something. Authentic upayas never involve rings or jewels.
Yeah.
There's a tradition that's just arisen. I don't want to put any jewelers out of business or anything, but it's like a tradition that's probably comes out of the Middle East. Where they're doing more like tantra and magic.
Yeah.
Whereas Indian thinking is more that the magic is in your consciousness itself. You are the magic. It's not in a jewel or a staff or something. So Indian yogis have ways of doing magic from their very being. But the really authentic ways of doing upaya are to do mantra, dhanam, or charity, puja. So the most, and maybe there's one other one that I forget, but they're all things that you actually have to do.
Sure.
You yourself have to do something and give something, like some form of seva, like you have to give your time. And so it is not haphazard either. It's like if you're having a problem with Saturn, that it's because you have a bad karma towards things that Saturn represents. You've mistreated things that Saturn represents in the past. So the way to rectify it is to do something good for the things that Saturn represents now. So go out and find somebody who's poor. Go out and find somebody who's old. Go out and find somebody who's sick and do something for them.
Sure.
That's the best remedy. It will erase your karmas that you generated by doing something bad towards somebody who is old, or something bad to, or not doing something that you were supposed to do.
Okay.
You know, like say your grandma got really old and you're the grandson and you just said, to hell with it. Right, in some lifetime. Well, that's why you're going to have some problems with aging and stuff like that in this lifetime. So the best way to deal with it is to go and help some old people.
Okay.
And more important, but you won't really be able to do it right unless you have the right mind. So doing the things together, like doing the mantra, which is going to change the way you're thinking about things, doing the action, which is changing what you're actually doing. That's what they used to do before people got the idea that you could just buy a ring or put it on and your life will change.
All right, awesome. But surely reciting the mantras as a form of meditation would be correlating to the Indian way of thinking, as opposed to just, purchasing the ring.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Like really try to read the Puranas and see if anybody ever put on a ring for anything. Nobody ever did that.
Mm-hmm.
They would do a puja or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this. It's been very enlightening. How can our viewers get in touch with you?
You can just search my name as Vic DiCara, or you can go to vicdicara.com, and then you'll get all kinds of ways from that.
He's got a really good YouTube channel as well, where he does have a playlist about those mantras. So check that out as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Goodbye.